We have lots to discuss in today's video, including previewing the big championship game between Team Canada and Team USA tonight at the Four Nation Face-Off Tournament. Plus, we have more news from the NHL waiver wire, including a couple of veteran players available on the waiver wire. Plus, we have news around the Canucks trying to extend their star goaltender, and I don't mean Thatcher Demko. We're also taking a look at some trade rumors around the NHL. We're taking a look tonight at the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Vancouver Canucks, and is there any chance the Red Wings trade captain Dylan Larkin? There's one Detroit media member who certainly feels like it's something they really should consider in the near future. We'll discuss all that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here in today's video. We're going to get into the Four Nation Face-Off Tournament, taking a look at Canada USA here tonight. But first, we have some sad news from the game of hockey. The hockey world has lost one of its many, many great people, and that's longtime Penguin broadcaster Mike Lange, who unfortunately passed away at the age of 79. He was a broadcaster for close to 50 years. He's certainly a very well-respected, a guy in his field, one of the best. He had a lot of expressions that he would certainly use. I know, thinking back, one that he would use sometimes that was funny would be beaten like a rented mule. That was one thing he would say sometimes for, teams that were not doing so well and things. And he had just a way of putting words together and expressions that, not only was he extremely knowledgeable and called the game extremely well, it just added an extra level of entertainment. And he had a great relationship with a lot of the top Penguins players. I know he was close with Muriel and had a good relationship with Auger, was close with Sid and Malkin. So certainly going to be, well missed amongst the hockey world. Of course, one of the better guys to ever do that broadcasting job. If you think about broadcasting, it might not seem like, to some at least, how important it is. But if you think about it, and it really, I know in the last year, I've thought about this more and more as we've seen some of the older broadcasters pass away. I know for me, it really hit me when Bob Cole passed away, because for many of us, they're not just a broadcaster. Yes, they're important to their team, but they're the voice of the team. And in some cases, the voice of a region or a country, like Mike Lange obviously is the voice of the Penguins. Thinking about Bob Cole, he's the voice of Canada, Hockey Night in Canada, that's the soundtrack of my childhood, right? And Mike Lange would be the same for many people similar age to me or older as well. So it's, they play an integral part in helping grow the game, making it more fun. Sometimes if you can't watch and you're only listening, just being able to visualize, it's such a key part of making the game great. And he was a huge part of that. So certainly, want to pass along our condolences to his family and friends. So one of the good guys that was well respected and just done such a terrific job as a hockey lifer. Unfortunately gone too soon. On to today's news. As I mentioned, it's a huge night in the game of hockey. Some people say this is bigger than hockey with all the political stuff going on between Canada and the United States. Unfortunately, I know there's a lot of people that I see comments on here all the time saying, to leave politics out of sports. And, to be honest, I'd love to see that be the case. And largely it has been, but obviously there's been some things that have kind of spilled over. And this is one of them. I mean, unfortunately right now there's a major, political rift or whatever you want to call it between two neighbors in North America that have been extremely friendly and great neighbors to each other for several decades and centuries now. And things are far from hostile, but there's certainly, when you have the President of the United States, talking about Canada becoming the 51st state, obviously Canadians don't take too kind to that. We don't want to lose our sovereignty. Obviously we largely love the United States, a great neighbor, a country many of us visit regularly, but do we want to be part of it? No, we're a sovereign country. We want to remain that way. And, a lot of stuff has kind of spilled over with the anthem booing and everything. And this game is turned into, it feels like it's politically charged. But it's these players, a lot of them have relationships within the NHL. Outside of the NHL, there's, I think, 7 sets of teammates between Canada and the U.S. We saw the 3 fights in 9 seconds in the first round of this, in the round-robin portion of this tournament. And it's going to be a feisty, hard-fought game. I have no doubt. I'm not so sure we're going to see the fights like we did last time. Not saying we won't see any. I just don't know that we're going to get that right off the hop. You never know, I guess. When the Kachuk brothers are involved, it's unpredictable. But it's going to be a heck of a game, and it could be one of the best games we have seen in a long time. I know the other game was an extremely close game. Like I said, it was a 2-1 game with an empty netter, made it 3-1. It was close right down to the wire. A very tight defensive game. Everybody on all sides and all positions committed to putting defense first and not giving up a lot. Unfortunately for Canada, the U.S. capitalized on one extra chance, and that was the difference in the game. Now for tonight's game, you're going to see a slightly different lineup. For Canada, you're getting Seth Jarvis back in. Of course, Cale Makar was not there for the U.S. game the first time around. He played against the Finns, remains in the lineup after missing a bit of time there. So Travis Konecny comes out of the lineup for Canada. Jarvis goes in. They made a lot of lineup changes with the lines against the Finns, and Canada, I think, has gotten better every game. And those set of lines is what they're starting with against the United States. So, of course, they changed things up. They put McDavid with Braden Point, Mark Stone, which was a much better combination. And then, of course, they had Crosby and McKinnon with Sam Reinhart, which was also a great combination. And they moved Marner down with Sorelli and Hagel, which was kind of used more of a checking line. And then Marchand and Bennett and Konecny played the last game. They're going to swap Konecny out for Jarvis for this game. Everything else is the same. On the U.S. side, they brought in, like I said, Tage Thompson and Brett Pesce. They're not going to be in the lineup tonight. Mike Sullivan's confirmed that basically everybody that was there besides Charlie McAvoy, who remains out, which is obviously no big shocker based on what we've heard the last day or two, that everybody's available to play. I know as I record this video about an hour before game time, it looks like Kyle Connor might be a healthy scratch. It looks like he's going to be out, and Chris Kreider, who went in the last game, is going to stay in. Now, he scored a goal. He played well. It's hard to imagine Kyle Connor, who, if I'm not mistaken, has more NHL goals this year than anybody else on that roster, is out. I mean, if you look at how they've got their lines done up, you get the Kachuk brothers playing with Eichel, which has been an effective line. You've got Matthews as the other top center playing with Jack Hughes, and Jake Gensel. Where are you going to put Connor? He's not the kind of guy that's really a bottom six guy. Not that some of these other guys are, but I guess maybe they're more comfortable with them being that. But I mean, I'm like, you're looking at it going, you're going to play Kreider and Brock Nelson, these guys over Connor. It just seems funny to me, but obviously they have different elements to their game that Connor doesn't. Like Kreider's a little bigger, maybe a little faster. So we'll see what happens, but it just seems weird. But at the same time, like I said, when you have teams that are this deep, you're going to see really good players not get in the lineup. And it seems so weird based on what we see in the NHL. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's going to be a hard-fought game. Won't be shocked if there is some scraps. I don't know that it's going to be right off the hop. As I mentioned, I guess one thing I know today, the U.S. team, they were hoping Donald Trump would come to the game. He's not going to be able to make it, but he did have a call with them this morning. Apparently, they loved it. Bill Guerin, to be honest, as a Canadian, a little disappointed in his comments. Guerin was asked if Trump talked with the American players and brought up the fact about Canada being the 51st state, and he said a little bit that he did. I'm like, just like you hear like the whole keep politics out of sports, and then the stuff like this happens. I mean, I have no problem with them talking to the president. I'm sure for most of them it's a thrill. Some of them, like Matthew Tkachuk, just recently met Donald Trump as they went to the White House to celebrate their Stanley Cup championship anyways. And like I said, I don't want to drag politics into this video, but this game has dragged politics into the game. And it just feels like a politically charged game now. So in some ways, I'm looking forward to it being over, just so we can, I'm tired of the politics part of this game, and I just want it to be down to best on best hockey players just being, playing the best for their country. And the best team may win, and they can still respect each other, or to the next matchup in a year's time at the 2026 Olympics. So we'll see what happens. It should be a great game. I hope everybody here gets a chance to watch it. The Vancouver Canucks have been trying to extend goaltender Kevin Lankinen. As I mentioned, star goaltender is what I called him in the opener. And to be fair, I think he deserves that. I mean, I don't think is the Canucks are not where they are without Lankinen. I think he's their unsung hero. He's their MVP. Call him what you want. But in a year where they had to trade JT Miller, they're not getting much out of Elias Pettersson. Even Besser's numbers aren't quite where they need to be. And you got a guy, and Hughes has been obviously phenomenal for them. Quinn Hughes has been the one constant, star player. But even Quinn has missed time this year, which is, something that you don't normally see. And, Lankin in between the pipes, though, like I said, that's why maybe he's more of an unsung hero. Hughes is probably the MVP, but still, they are trying to extend him. So far, they have not been successful. They have made offers, I guess, but so far, it's been rejected. So I know with Thatcher Demko, I think it's wise they keep around a solid number 2 goalie. Lankinen was a great find for them late in the offseason, and he's played so well that they're going to have no choice if they want to keep him but to pony up some money. And so far, they haven't come at him with enough security or money or what combination to get it done. So we'll see. They'll keep working away at that. Now, onto the rumor section. I came across a really odd article. It's something I never expected to see. But I've seen people around like Detroit reacting to it. So I looked into it, and there's an article in the Detroit Free Press from Carlo Monterez suggesting that the Red Wings really need to consider trading captain Dylan Larkin. Now, there's a caveat with that, and it's not that they need to consider that right now, but if they miss the playoffs, like he goes on to say essentially that, the Red Wings under the Yzerman era, they have yet to get into the playoffs. Larkin hasn't seen playoff hockey, and while if they continue to miss the playoffs after this year and maybe one more, it sounded like in the article like he might be willing to give Yzerman one more year at most to kind of make it happen. But if that doesn't happen, because right now they're in a wild card spot, so it seems like an odd time for an article like this to come out. And for this article, I wanted to talk about it because it's getting, like I said, quite a lot of flack, pushback, etc. from Detroit hockey fans, and I don't blame them. Right now, if you're on a 4-nation break, don't have a lot of breathing room. It's far from a guarantee, but you have your team in a wild card spot right now. You haven't made the playoffs in several years. This might be the year for them. I mean, like I said, it's not guaranteed yet. They still got work to do, but they're in a better spot. And then this comes out. So basically, if the rest of the season doesn't go well and they fall flat and miss, they need to consider it, or maybe one more year and then for sure consider trading them and give this team a whole reset and then kind of move on from Yzerman, reset the team, and so forth. I mean, Dylan Larkin signed, an 8-year deal at $69 million. They got 6 years left in that deal. He's a team captain, Michigan native. He's played his whole hockey life in Michigan. He's certainly not the problem. And you could make an argument that, he'd be a player that would have good value in that you'd be able to get a good return. But even if you thought you needed to retool and reset, you're not going to move everybody, right? The problem here is that, because I think Larkin's one of the few bright spots with Raymond, it's the UFA guys they've brought in, for not all of them, but that hasn't worked out. Like the Comfer contract, the Kopp contract, they brought in Jeff Petrie, that's the ones that didn't work out. Those are a bigger part of your issue. You've had inconsistent goaltending. The Tarasenko deal didn't work out. That's kind of where you went wrong. The DeBrincat trade, I think it's fair to say it's worked out okay, but I think they were hoping that DeBrincat would get back to being 40 goal DeBrincat, because he dropped down to like 27 or whatever it was with Ottawa, and he really hasn't been better than that with Detroit. And they've even brought in Patrick Kane to work with them, who he had most of his success with in Chicago prior. So again, I don't think they should trade Larkin. I think that the author here is on the wrong path. Do they need to make significant changes? If they miss the playoffs this year, then I would think that everybody would be on a short leash. I mean, they just recently changed the coach, so Todd McClellan's not going to be in danger. But I would say if they miss the playoffs this year, should they consider moving on from Yzerman? Maybe, but definitely no. If they miss this year and one more year, and Yzerman can't make the team better enough to get in, then yes, I think Yzerman's had enough time. I would think that it's time for the organization to go in a new direction. That's my opinion on that front. But trading Larkin would be so much of a setback. And to be honest, he's not going to want to go anywhere. Like I said, he's a Michigan native through and through. He's still young enough that he's going to want to give this time to win in Detroit. Yeah, they need to do something to make the team better, but this is not it. Not it at all. You'd be keeping Larkin, you'd be keeping Raymond, you'd be keeping Sider, and maybe a couple of the top prospects, the younger guys like a Casper. It's a lot of the other guys is who you'd consider moving. So I don't agree with that at all, but if you see that article or you hear any speculation around Larkin, that's where it's coming from. I don't think there's any chance he gets traded, but I wanted to bring it up and discuss it here because it was interesting. I was surprised to see any hockey writers in Detroit making that suggestion right now. Of course, we know Elias Pettersson. We've talked a lot about Petey in recent days and weeks. We've even talked about him yesterday, talking about the fact that according to Frank Saravalli, he's pretty close to being untradeable now. And if he doesn't pick it up the rest of this year, that he could get to being untradeable by the offseason. Well, I've seen some articles today suggesting that one team that might not lose interest in Pettersson and would probably be looking for more of a buy low situation, which the Canucks might want to be really leery of, but would be the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers are still looking for that true number one center. And they are hard to get. Ideally, you need to draft them most of the time. There's not a lot of these guys that come available. We saw Jack Eichel, for example, with Buffalo become available a couple of years back. But typically, it's not a very common thing. So, even if you do have that opportunity to trade for them, you normally have to give up a lot. But where Pettersson's, not living up to the current contract, there's a lot of speculation that the only way the Flyers make that deal is if they can get a buy low scenario. But they might be willing to part with some prospects like an Oliver Bonk, maybe a Jet Lushenko. Like, they're not out there trying to move those prospects by any means. They like those guys, and they see them being parts of their future. But if they can get a true number one center, then that changes everything. So at the end of the day, that might be something they're willing to do in a buy low scenario. If the Vancouver Canucks get to the point, like Frank Saravalli was saying, that they just want to unload the contract and they realize that getting a big return is not going to be an option. But like Frank was saying, that if they might have more risk by keeping him than selling low, because if you keep him, the longer it drags on, the lower that value is going to get. It's just going to get to the point where like nobody's going to want it at all, even with a small return or no return. And that's bad for them. They have a lot of money tied up in the cap space. They have obviously a lot of money invested in a player that's not giving them the performance they need. It's a bad scenario all around. So yeah, there could be risk in them, but at the same time, there's just as much risk in them trading him and him figuring things out and finding his game somewhere else. I firmly think, based on everything we've seen, that Pettersson's biggest problem is it's upstairs. It's between the ears. I really think that he needs to get things figured out in that way. Because Miller's been gone for a while. We haven't seen the change. Maybe it wasn't as much of the problem as we all thought it was. I don't know. It's interesting. But either way, if the Canucks really want to move Pettersson, and we don't think they do right now, if they get to the offseason and they get to that point, and they get to the point where they're like, we just need to move this contract because it's aging horribly, look for the Flyers to try to pull off a steal, even though that does come with some risk. Now, lastly, I want to take a look at the Toronto Maple Leafs. There's some new reports from Dave Pagnotta, kind of wondering what they're going to do here. And he says that a lot of their deadline plans are likely going to stem around what's going to happen with pending UFA Mitch Marner. Essentially, if Marner, because we don't know that Marner and the Leafs are negotiating, we haven't heard much. It's been pretty quiet. I think it's fair to say that negotiation is largely going to take place when the Leafs season ends, up until July 1st before free agency would be my best guess on when they're going to do that, unless they've been just doing really good at keeping it quiet and NHL insiders haven't gotten wind of it. So they may surprise us with an extension before the deadline. But at the end of the day, even if they don't have it done, their level of confidence in whether or not they're going to get it done will likely play a big role. If they don't know, if they're not sure that he's going to stay and that they're going to be able to get him signed, Pagnotta suggests they may want to go all in and really make sure they have a chance to try to win with him now, because their team could look very different next year if he doesn't re-sign. Now, I think Marner wants to be a Leaf. I think it's going to boil down to money. I think for a lot of these players participating in Four Nations, getting a chance to play with different people might get the wheels turning a little bit. I'm not saying that he's going to play with somebody else and be like, oh, you know what? I now know what it's like to play with other guys besides Matthews and Willie, and I want to go there. But it probably doesn't hurt any. If you think about it, players recruit each other all the time. We know that, right? So, and we know that there's teams out there that are going to want to make a big splash in the offseason. I would look to teams like Utah, even a team like Colorado that they moved on from Ranton, and we know that Nathan MacKinnon is a big Mitch Marner fan. I'm not saying that he would go there to either of those places. I think Toronto is still the more likely destination, but it makes you wonder, right? Teams are going to be looking to take this extra cap space and put it to good use. So we know the Leafs have kicked tires on a variety of forwards. They've inquired and kicked tires on guys like Casey Middlestat in Colorado, Brock Nelson in Long Island, Scott Lawton in Philly, Dylan Cousins in Buffalo, Yanni Gorda out of Seattle, Brandon Tanev out of Seattle, Ryan Donato in Chicago. And a lot of this is going to boil down to price. It's believed they don't really want to trade top prospects like Easton Cowan. Sorry, I wanted to call him Owen Cowan for a second. Easton Cowan and Fraser Minton, or a future first round pick. But if they can get a high end player that's going to come with a bit of term and will stick around, maybe they'll do that. Otherwise, like on a rental player, somebody's going to play third line. They really don't want to. They don't really want to give up that substantial of a return, which makes sense. So that's why guys like Lawton, who teams have kicked tires on for a long time, the Flyers don't seem to really want to move him unless they can get a first rounder. Well, he's not a high-end enough player by many teams to pay that price. So hard to say which route they go, right? Like all the other guys we know are available to some degree, but what are the asking prices going to end up being? And what can they fit into their salary cap? What has to move out to make it work? There's all those kind of decisions, but we know the Leafs are looking at a variety of team or players out there. Like I know, like I said, the Sabres thing, Cousins. I don't think that's going to happen. That would be a big deal. But Brock Nelson maybe. But I think there's going to be other teams that might be better fit for him. And at the same time, we know the Islanders are not completely sold on trading him yet. They still, I think, want to offer him a contract by the sounds of things. Casey Middlestat might be an interesting option. But he hasn't really worked out to the extent that they were hoping for in Colorado. Forward group, you could say maybe he's built kind of similarly to the Leafs. So, again, not sure that he's the greatest fit. There's Lawton. Is Tanev or Donato enough to move the needle? It's hard to say, right? So, I think, if the Leafs are not confident that Marner is going to sign, then they're going to try to win with it. I mean, they're going to win. They want to win at all costs, regardless. Don't get me wrong. But it's more of maybe a little more urgency if they're not sure that Marner's sticking around. If they're confident, they have enough conversations that they're confident they're going to get that done, then I think they're going to be a little bit more cautious. They're going to want to add. They want to put themselves in best position as they can, but they're going to probably be a little bit more cautious, you could say, and not want to, make a panic move here because they're still going to be, not to say that they wouldn't be competitive without Marner, but certainly not going to be to the same level. Like he's a big important piece there. So hard to say how things go. But at the end of the day, the Leafs are looking at a lot of names. Hard to say what direction they go in, but the Marner contract extension will play a big role in what direction they end up going. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.